But I want to ask you about this ideal of our tone of voice sometimes gets betrayed because we have a negative bias.
Hmm.
Can you talk about how that affects people? I mean, give us a little detail on that.
For sure. So, I always try to remind people of the negativity bias. So, human brains, we are structured through whatever reason, however we ended up here, but our brains are structured to focus more on the negative than the positive. So, if you hear something, if you hear some criticism, if someone says, "Hey, you didn't do a great job on the executive summary on our homework assignment," and then I go on to say 17 really good things that they did do, the person is going to fixate on that negative feedback. And sometimes they completely bypass and don't ingrain any of the positive things. They grab onto the negative, and your brain can also grab onto that negative thought and then expand on it. How many times have we gotten into an argument and then we realize we've said something stupid? We walk away, and an hour later, we think of the best comeback. And why didn't I think of that comeback an hour ago? What was I doing? And then, so now two negative thoughts have happened, and you just spiral, right? And it keeps you up that night because you just cannot let it go that you said something silly and then you had the perfect answer an hour later. And so that negativity bias really affects us. And if we've had events in the past that have kind of solidified that negative spiral, you might not realize it, but you as a manager or leader might be saying like, "Hey, let's talk about your annual review." And that right there can cause your employee to spiral all the way down into who knows where, because they have that bias and they've had certain things that affect their way of thinking. So as a leader, you have to be mindful. And as a person who might spiral in a direction, you have to be mindful. The best way that I taught myself how to avoid those downward spirals was, let's balance it out with logic. Let's think through whatever negative situation I'm thinking we went through and say, okay, I didn't get the job that I wanted, but logically speaking, why didn't I get the job I wanted? Oh, well, there are 300 other applicants. There were people who had more experience than me. There were all things that are true, but they're not negatives on me. They're kind of reframing it into a more positive or at least a more logical direction.
It makes me think
Hmm.
about filmmaking. So I always tell my husband I never want to know how films are made or what all the secrets are because it would ruin watching any movie.
Hmm.
So from your perspective, you have training and you kind of have the filmmaking view of how communication takes place.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing you recognize things that the average layperson like myself would not. So how do you incorporate that just in organizational development? Because certainly leaders need to be good communicators and they need to
Hmm.
be effective and they need to be aware of the negativity bias.